Great. Great. 4 o'clock today on the 27th of May 2020. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. This is the first installment of Gaming in Spain new webinar series. From now on, we intend to have one new episode on a relevant topic every 6 weeks. Gaming in Spain is a business community that seeks to facilitate the sharing of knowledge and networking among all industry stakeholders. In addition to our webinars and print magazines, we also aim to organize a conference like usual later this year on November 12th at Wanda Metropolitano in Madrid, of course, if circumstances permit. A lot has happened in the recent weeks. The state of alert is currently still in force, with most Spanish regions in phase 1 or 2 on the road back to normal. The industry has been forced to deal with emergency advertising restrictions, while we saw the appointment of a new Director General of the DGOJ. The previous Director General, Juan Espinosa, had been part of the regulator's leadership for the last 7 years. In short, there have been quite a few developments and there's much to discuss. Today's webinar will last 45 minutes. It consists of 2 parts. First, our 3 panelists will each address and answer 2 relevant questions. That's the first part. Second, during the last 15 minutes of the webinar, we will open up the discussion and invite our listeners to submit their own questions to our panelists. In order to submit your questions and to vote in our poll, please make use of the Slido app. It's anonymous, it's free. You can download it from the App Store or scan the QR code on the top right of your screen and click the link. The events tag is GIS20. That's GIS20. Next slide, please. Gaming in Spain and the business community we represent is being made possible by the generous support of our partners and sponsors. Thank you. We could not do this without you. Next slide, please. As I said, and also welcoming new attendees to the webinar at the moment, to fully participate in this webinar, meaning to vote in our poll and to submit your questions, it is necessary to make use of the Slido app. You can download it from the App Store or scan the QR code and click the link. It's anonymous and it's free. If you make use of the app, the event code for this webinar is GIS20. That's GIS20. And to show you the example of that in Slido, next slide, please. If you log onto Slido, this is what you will see. There are 2 tabs, one to vote in our poll, the other to submit and upvote questions. You can switch between the tabs by clicking or tapping at the top of your screen. Let's move to the Slido poll. I would like to encourage all our listeners to participate and to vote. This is a poll and we will share the results with you in a little while. How will Spain's online gambling industry fare in the coming months? Again, to participate, point your camera to the QR code or go to the Slido app in your app store. And then there's 4 options, 4 poll questions to pick from. While some of the restrictions are unhelpful, the regulatory frameworks remain fundamentally sound and the industry will weather the storm without too many problems. The market was due for a correction anyway is the second option. The current circumstances will only hasten the inevitable. Thirdly, the new restrictions will benefit established incumbents. We will see further market consolidation. And as last option, the new restriction will make the Spanish online market fundamentally less attractive as a 4th option. So you have a minute to do this. You can also do this while we continue with the next part of the questions to the panelists while using the app. The next slide, please. With us we have here today Mikel Lopez de Torre. He is chairman of Jdigital. We have Pedro Lopez Martín-Andino, managing partner at Martín-Andino Abogados, and Eduardo Morales Hermo, gambling and betting consultant at iGamingCo. Welcome all speakers to this webinar. And thank you for joining us today. Our first question is to Mikel Lopez. Michael, how are you? I hope you're doing well.
Good, thanks. Thanks a lot for the invite.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you. Michael, what has been the impact of the current COVID-19 pandemic and the government's temporary advertising restrictions on the online gaming industry?
Well, I think the best word to describe the impact of the COVID in the industry is devastating. As an industry, the gambling companies had already seen a great drop in revenues driven by the stop of all sports betting competitions. In the case of land-based companies, they've also been further hit by the mandatory closure of all venues. But finally, the ban on all commercial communications, not just advertising, because it's not just a ban on advertising, but also all forms of commercial communications, has had a terrible consequence and has put many other companies in the industry in jeopardy. Contrary to the objective that the ban pretended to achieve and the body that pretended to uphold, which was protecting the vulnerable users, the ban has driven many Spanish users to illegal gambling sites, which have been advertising free of legal competition in social media, and now also, as of the last couple of weeks, in Bundesliga games in some cases, and has created a disadvantage for all the legal operators, and made a very compelling case at the same time for the exception that's sanctioned in the draft of the upcoming royal decree, for the exception to the rule of live games. We all have seen in the last couple of weeks gambling companies advertising on Bundesliga games. This is obviously something that the Spanish government cannot control in any way, and it should make them think about how local legal licensed operators can deal in a global market with exposure to offshore or foreign gambling bans. The government will get the headlines that it was after, but it will be at the expense of the health and financial well-being of nationals and the industry itself.
Okay, so concerns from your side. Thank you, Mikel. Let's move on to the second question. The new royal decree on gambling advertising will introduce a series of permanent restrictions on gambling advertising. What else can we expect from the current government regarding future gambling regulation? Mikel.
On the decree itself, until we've seen the final text of the royal decree, it's kind of hard to tell what the next moves will be. In the draft, if some of you among the public haven't read it yet, there were at least 8 instances in which the regulator reserved the rights to further regulate different topics through the publishing of different rules without going through the whole royal decree process. I think that the problem when a regulator loses the role as a technical market referee to ensure that the regulation strikes the right balance between serving the public interest and preserving business freedom is that it becomes very unpredictable. What we can be sure of is that legal uncertainty is here to stay, whereas before we have a long history of regulators that have been predictable in the sense that we knew the focus was on responsible gambling and effective player protection measures. Yeah. We truly have no idea what the next punchline is going to be, as it doesn't really follow a genuine recognizable agenda of valid regulatory objectives.
Okay, so that's a change with more uncertainty in the future. Mikel, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next 2 questions are for a second panelist, Pedro Lopez. Pedro, how are you today? Can you hear me? Pedro, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Welcome to the webinar, Pedro, and thank you for joining us today. Let's move to the next slide, please. And the first question of Pedro. Pedro, the appointment of Mikel Arana as the new Director General of the DGOJ indicates that Spain's national gambling regulator will likely steer a different course in the future, as Mikel also indicated. How will this affect the day-to-day operations of licensed operators?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that obviously this new government implies a very radical change in the trend that has been currently followed with regard to online gaming by the previous governments. It's plain to see, for example, if we take a look at the political program of the left-wing parties that right now form part of the government, that well, gaming and online gaming is regarded as something harmful in some way that has to be restricted. And this is what we have to live with, and what we can expect right now in the actions that the government, particularly the DGOJ as a ministerial department attached to the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, is going to adopt in the future. In this sense, well, the appointment of Mr. Arana as the new general director again follows this trend and follows this approach, while the previous general directors of the DGOJ had a more technical profile. In this case, the profile of the new general director of the DGOJ is more political, and therefore will be focused in implementing the approach that I have just mentioned.
Yeah.
So how is this going to affect the day-to-day operations of licensed operators? I think that from the day-to-day relationship of the operators with the DGOJ regarding reporting and compliance of regulatory obligations will not be much affected. In the DGOJ, there is a personnel which is highly professional and very proactive in assisting operators, and I think this is going to follow. Maybe we could expect a more strict approach in this type of compliance or even in enforcement actions. But again, don't expect much changes in this sense. There is another field in which obviously we cannot expect much from this new approach of the DGOJ, which has to do with understanding the business needs of the operators and being able to understand new possibilities. For instance, previously the DGOJ was happy to consider and to study the possibility of open new live games. As you know, right now, only roulette is allowed live game, and the DGOJ was interested in the possibility of considering how opening these two other games. Obviously, right now it won't be possible to expect new proactive actions for the operators from the DGOJ.
Great. I think that was very helpful, Pedro, and it's a lot of information you have been giving here. Let's look at the second question for you. Next slide, please. So, Pedro, the current coronavirus crisis and more stringent advertising restrictions, as also mentioned to Mikel before, will likely mean that some licensed operators will decide to exit the Spanish market. Other operators may still be seeing opportunities. What do you think we can expect regarding M&A activity?
Yeah, it's thanks for the question, Willem. It's very likely that we will see M&A activity in the medium term. So during the next 6 or 12 months, we will see transactions involving gaming operators in Spain. On the one hand, we have 80 operators with gaming licenses. This could be maybe too much, considering, first of all, the economic situation and also the new approach and the new restrictions, for example, on advertising. So probably those operators that enter the Spanish market in the last licensing window could be probably considering the possibility of withdrawing from the Spanish market. We will see during the next months. As you can see, well, there have been licensing windows in the year 2011, 2014, and 2018. Those are the 3 licensing windows that have been open so far. And it seems that it will take long until new licensing windows are open. At least during the next years, it won't be possible to expect the licensing windows again to be open. And therefore, this will increase the interest of operators that are not in the Spanish market and that could be potentially interested in entering the market. From the more legal perspective, it's also interesting to note that licenses themselves cannot be traded. So you have to purchase the operator itself. and therefore it will be possible to see several types of transactions, which could be very simple, consisting in the purchase of an operator that owns licenses without activity, to other more complex transactions, which would involve operators with activity, with therefore a portfolio of customers. So yeah, definitely, I think that we will see movements in this area during the next months.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts about the possible future developments there. And we will definitely see the next 6 to 12 months. Undoubtedly, you at home, you may have questions of your own. So please do not hesitate to submit your questions through the Slido app. You can submit your questions just as you're logged on. Use the QR code or download the Slido app from the App Store. Let's move on to our third panelist of today, Eduardo. Eduardo, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us, Eduardo. Loud and clear from Madrid. So, Eduardo, let's take a look at the outlook of Spain's gambling market. Currently, there are 80 licensed iGaming operators, as Pedro commented as well. How many do you think of these will survive and become successful? And what happens to the rest?
Well, I think what is happening in the Spanish market is not different than what is happening in other regulated markets. There's just half a dozen of operators that gather like 75-80% of all the wagering, and therefore of the GGR. And then there is a few that maybe have a different business model, that are more local, that have their own, let's say, land-based premises where they can capitalize players that can survive. The rest is difficult for them to do a sustainable business, because to move away those half a dozen main operators who are really in domain of the market is costing them a lot of money, and they are not progressing. This is already happening. It's not something that has to do with the situation now. All regulated markets are very similar. Some are a little more ample, perhaps verticals in casino provide more opportunities for more operators to do business. Sports betting doesn't whatsoever. So it's only going to be a matter of time. I mean, there's going to be companies which are expertise. They know exactly how to operate online. They will evaluate. They're going to be favored by being a multinational company, whereby their costs of operation is not the same than a local operator that operates only in 1 or 2 markets. When you are operating in like multiple jurisdictions, you have maybe a team that covers practically all of them, or you have to have a very specialized, very short number of guys in the market itself. So having said that, and going to your question specifically, I think that is going to be, people always resist to take decisions when business are not going well. They think they're going to improve, but eventually those that are more practical and pragmatic, they will eventually decide to move away if this is affecting their bottom line. Most of the big ones, I don't want to say names, maybe they don't suffer as much, but those that are individually trying to approach the Spanish market alone, those are going to be moving away for sure in the next 1 or 2 years. I think we have to give them a little more time. I don't think it's something that's going to happen tomorrow. And as Pedro said before, there are going to be movements of M&As, of operators that will want to move out and do other businesses, and maybe others that are curious to enter the Spanish market and they believe in their capacity to really enter and make money. I think this is not going to change much to what it was before, but it's going to be evolving into a market limited to maybe a dozen of operators at the end of the day. And it all depends how the product evolves. You know, if the gaming board, the gaming board allows the business to move on and improve the product, improve the offer, and so forth, this opens some more opportunities. If, as it looks like, the new political approach of the online gaming in Spain is going to make it more stand still as it pertains to innovation, then things are going to worsen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for this extensive answer, Eduardo. I think it's quite interesting. Moving to the next question, and the last question for you today, Eduardo. Spain's land-based gambling sector has been hit very hard by the COVID pandemic. Do you think we can go back to normal when the economy reopens, or do we see a more fundamental shake-up?
Well, we can only go to abnormality. There is no such a thing of a new normality. I don't believe in it. I think the next stage is abnormality. At this moment, it's a disaster, not just because all the premises are closed, but also what is the outlook? Governments, are not only in Spain, but also in other markets, do not consider gaming and entertainment. They consider it something else, which they don't even know what, but it sells. And they are not going to give any kind of equality treatment as they will give restaurants or cafes or any other similar entertainment with public access activities. This is going to damage the industry. I think the land-based is not going to recover for at least sometime until 2022 to 23 to come back to the numbers they had in 2019. I think the economy is going to move on faster than we think, because even though we are going to be deep down probably near 15% on the gross product this year, next year I think we are going to have practically another half of it we're going to recuperate the first year. But land-based operators are not going to be able to recuperate their income. This year, they're going to lose anywhere from 60 to 70% of the revenues that they had planned for the year. Next year, probably are going to be losing another 30 or 40, which means, as you can imagine, some of these companies are going to leave locations behind. They're going to they have to restructure their business model because there's not going to be any normality whatsoever. So I feel that there's going to be a consolidation as well. This is going to lead to consolidation of the industry by small companies being acquired or absorbed by another big ones, and maybe some big ones we may have a surprise or two on companies that are not going to be sustainable. Companies that need 25, 30 million a month to survive. Big companies in Spain. No, if they are not able to recuperate activity, and it's not going to happen as fast, they are going to suffer if they don't find the necessary financing that they need.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for sharing the outcome of the crystal ball with you. So 2 to 3 years recuperation time, abnormality, interesting word, and consolidation. Eduardo, thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights. And this is the moment where we move to the interactive part of our webinar. So first, we'll be taking a look at the poll results, and second, we'll go over the audience questions together with our panelists. So please keep those questions coming. In order to ask your questions, again, scan the QR code, follow the link, or download the Slido app and use the event tag GIS20. That's GIS20. S is on the top of the screen. So let's move to the poll results here. So the poll we asked at the beginning of the webinar, we see quite clear preference for the first and the first two answers. So 47% voting for the new restrictions will make Spanish online markets fundamentally less attractive. And we will see severely reduced growth rates. That's 47%. And as a second, the new restrictions will benefit established incumbents. We will see further market consolidation with only a temporary dent in GGR growth, with a smaller 7% preference for the number 3 and number 4 answer. So, oops, exactly. There was still some votes coming in, and answer 1 and answer 2 just flipped. But I think that the trend is quite clear. How our attendees see the developments in the future. Let's move to the Q&A part of the event. So still, if you're in Slido, you can ask questions. These questions can be seen by everybody else. You are anonymous, and you can upvote questions of other attendees. And as a first question, we have here, a previous draft of the royal decree was publicly consulted. Will there have to be a second public consultation on the new version? I'm looking at here at the 3 of you. Maybe Pedro or Mikel want to want to answer that? Pedro,
yeah, let me tell you, I'm speaking out of memory, and if so, Mikel, you please feel free to correct me, but as far as I remember, the draft royal decree was published at the end of February, and at that point, it was opened, the DGOJ opened the public consultation phase, which ended up on mid-March. So that public consultation phase, and in fact, I'm aware of the fact that many sectors, interested parties, operators have already submitted their considerations regarding the draft, and I think that in fact this public consultation step is already finalized, right?
Not quite. I think this is where the funny bit comes in. So the public consultation period was meant to end on the 16th of March. But as you all know, the 16th of March is when the state of alarm came in place. So all administrative processes came to a halt on that point, meaning that until the state of alarm is actually lifted, anyone can still make contributions to the royal decree. So anyone who, for whatever reason, meets that deadline of the 16th of March, still can submit their feedback to the DGOJ, and by all means is still within the valid period. So again, everyone feel free to submit it. Feel free to invite anyone that might have an opinion to submit any feedback to the royal decree, because it's still open.
Okay, still open. So thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Mikel, for clarifying that. So from the audience questions, we go to the next question here from the audience. Are we likely to see a license shift to include software providers directly than rather indirectly, as we have today in the next window? So there's two questions in one. So next window, Pedro said something about it, and then software providers to be included in the licensing process. Any volunteers?
Well, I don't know. I don't see the software providers getting involved into licensing. I mean, they will just have to follow the same requirements they have now. I think they will just require the certification and to be homologated, and that's it. I think that I don't think there is any option as a software providers themselves, unless the rules change. So I don't see that as a possible.
Exactly. So no need and no possibility. Eduardo, Pedro, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, let me add that it might be possible, particularly for big software providers, to consider this approach due to the fact that, as you know, there are not B2B licenses in Spain. Only operators are able to obtain licenses, and software suppliers do not have direct access to the DGOJ and to the regulatory certification processes. All this has to be done through the operators. So becoming an operator and obtaining a license as an operator gives software providers the possibility of controlling in a more close and clear manner the certification processes, and to have initiative and to be able to facilitate the certification work for the customers, which are the operators. So yeah, this is an approach, but obviously becoming an operator in Spain entails several heavy obligations, particularly economic. So this could be an approach to study, but again, only for big and important software suppliers.
Yeah, okay.
But this is, I mean, if they become an operator, they have to operate.
They do. Well.
Well, no.
They lose the license if they don't operate within a given period of time.
Yeah, exactly. But again, even if you are not actively through a website, you can still control the certification process. as an operator, and that's the key advantage. Even if they do not want to offer B2C services directly to end users.
Yeah, that's quite clear. Move on to the next question. Here, I think it's quite clear for who that is. What is the current status of Jdigital's marketing code of conduct, and how does it relate to the new advertising restrictions? Mikel, I'm sure you know something.
Yeah, I think that's on me. So, well, it's approved and it's in place and it's been upheld by all the operators and media groups. So that's in place. It's been in place since, I think it's January 2020. The understanding that I have is one of the reasons why there hasn't been a dramatic change in the advertising draft, in the sense that we haven't gone to a full ban paradigm in the royal decree exercise that happened in February. But other than that, I'm not entirely sure of what other information can I provide at this point. It's approved, it's in place. Operators have been following it for the last 5 months. And it was an industry responsibility exercise that actually we brought along, and we started promoting since February as an association, February 2019, that is. Unfortunately, because it involves many stakeholders, not just the operators and the industry, but also the media groups, the CNMC, Autocontrol itself, and the DGOJ. Getting it approved was a bit more, well, it was a longer process, let's just say, than we hoped for. But nonetheless, he made it before the new government came to take office. And I believe it was at least one of the steps that they took of the goodwill of the industry to try and not follow down the path of a full ban for the get-go.
Great, that's very useful. Thank you, Mikel. Moving on to the next questions. From the Slido panel, who will suffer more given the current situation from COVID and advertising restrictions, the international or the local operators? That's an interesting question. Eduardo, maybe? Mikel?
I give the option to Mikel. He's closer more to the digital. I can give my opinion after that.
Well, I think to begin answering the question, I think we would have to dive a little deeper into that category of operators. Within the national operators, we have retail operators, we have full online operators. In the internationals, we have all sorts of operators, from big international operators present in many markets to smaller operators that are only in a few markets in Europe. So it's quite heterogeneous. Sorry, I can't come up with the word right now. Heterogeneous?
Yes.
Yeah.
Diverse. It's a diverse bunch of operators. I'd say this is not good for anyone. And I think that's, I cannot say it in a more clear way. This is not good news for anyone, and it's something that is affecting every single market globally. But obviously, the bigger the operators, the easier it is for them to deal with any adversities. And that applies not just to gambling companies, but to any company worldwide.
Okay, so
I would just try to add one thing, that as I agree fully with Mikel, but you see, those operators which are land-based operators do not understand yet that they have the opportunity of their brand to be promoted from a different angle than the advertising. Companies that we all very well know, which they have very well-known brands, they have that opportunity to capitalize their retail locations through the brand. Of course, they are closed now, so they can very little do that, but they will in the future do that. As Mikel said, I think the big ones are able to cope with this much better. The small ones we can see, and we know already that they are not able to do much about it. But I think there is an opportunity for the Spanish land-based operators that have an online channel to try to learn from that from now on they have to go into the omni-channel and the channelization of the offer through digital of their land base is going to be a must. They have to forget about cannibalization, shifting, or anything like that. They just have to do it just like the English did in the UK. All the betting companies, they were able to really enhance their business through online, and a lot of the marketing and advertising and commercial actions were done through the locations.
Yeah, okay, quite good. I think it was an interesting question with two angles, one from Mikel, size rather than the location of the company, and the brand leverage with the retail business from Eduardo. Thank you. Let's move to the next question. Will the COVID situation in terms of taxes and the new DGOJ director appointment affect the Ceuta and Melilla tax benefits for your operators? So COVID and taxes with regards to the new appointment in Madrid. Pedro.
Let me tell you first of all that even if the approach of the new government and the DGOJ is restrictive, it will be quite difficult to amend the current tax regime, favorable tax regime approved for Ceuta and Melilla. This has to be done through an act, and the budget, the yearly budget act, could be used if the government wanted, for example, to eliminate these benefits. They should do it through an act. This requires majority of the parliament, and it will be difficult for them to obtain the necessary majority. Of course, this is in the parliament. This is uncertain, but of course this could happen, not in an immediate manner, but this is something that has to be followed.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Anybody else want to contribute to that? No, let's move to the next question. Yes, here is the new director of the DGOJ interacting and gathering feedback from the industry. And how do you, all the three of you, see his interest in the current status of the sector? I think it's relatively early to say, but maybe there's some signals that some of you have. I think especially during this COVID period.
Yeah.
I think, frankly, we've tried to make contact with the regulator, but we have not been able to meet him yet because he hasn't replied to our request. So I find it really hard to pass judgment on his views or his potential actions in the future.
Okay, great. Well, let's keep that for the next webinar then. Let's see the next question here. What's the expected? Oops. Where are the opportunities in the current online market? Are there still promising niche markets? I think, Eduardo, you covered some opportunities already with regard to retail. But with regards to niche markets, do you think anything there, Eduardo?
If you are relating all to Spain, to Spanish online, well, it all depends how the regulation evolves. What is going to allow to give opportunity to more products that will establish a market, a more specific market for that product themselves. I know esports, virtuals, things like that. Probably more live games. I don't see this government allowing the business to evolve towards innovation. I have my doubts, and that's in line with the prior question. I don't see the interaction of the new general director, who is going to be a puppet of the Minister of Consumer. Okay, not before. Before the DGOJ had a lot of independence. The people that was above them trusted them. They thought they were doing a good job, and they were the experts. In this case, we are putting politics before knowledge, and therefore the DGOJ, not the professionals, the technical guys, which are qualified and really good, do a great job. But I think this is a politically controlled the nomination, and this is going to condition not only any niche market. I think it's going to condition the innovation of the industry.
Okay, so no innovation due to political influence, Eduardo. I guess we'll go to one last question here. Quite interesting questions coming in here. Interesting questions in this COVID period. Do you think with a lack of land-based gaming, this will push more people to online? I mean, we've seen similar questions popping up in other regulated European territories. Mikel?
I think, frankly, it hasn't been the case during the COVID crisis. Again, that could have had something to do with the fact that there was no sports betting because there were no sports competitions. We'll have to wait and see. I find it somewhat unlikely, at least in the near future. In particular, because if we see the regulation going in the direction that it seems to be going, it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to capitalize on any, as digital operators, we're going to be able to capitalize on any opportunity presented by problems in other distribution channels.
Great.
Well, I think that there is a big move, not only in Spain. I am seeing all over, especially in emerging markets like Latin America, especially, that all the land-based operators, they want to go online. They think that online is the promised land, because they think that by opening a web, the next day they're going to start cashing in. They are wrong. You know, the problem with that, how the land-based players will move into online, it will depend how the land-based operators manage the business. If they are able to manage the business properly, if they are able to offer a comprise offer, a universal offer of their proposal through the same brand, I think they are able. They can take players from land-based into online. Not that the people is going to move online because they don't have all open land-based premises. This is something very difficult to estimate, but it is going to happen and can happen if the strategy is properly directed. And this is happening everywhere where the land-based companies are operating online. Just look at what is happening in the US. And as Mikel said before, sports betting is going to be the best channel for that, as well as slots. But it is only, sports betting has the biggest strength and the major liquidity to have that happen.
Great. Well, I think two interesting angles to the same question. And I think we should wrap with this question here today. We're at 42 minutes into the webinar, and yeah, we're slowly running out of time. Let's wrap it up today. So this was the first installment in the new Gaming in Spain webinar, and we offer similar webinar series for our Gaming in Holland and Gaming in Germany communities. This webinar was recorded today, and a link to the recording will be shared in our next Gaming in Spain newsletter. If you have not signed up yet for the free newsletter, please do that at www.gaminginspain.com. I would like to thank today's speakers, Mikel, Pedro, and Eduardo, for their contributions.
My pleasure. Thank you for letting me.
Very much.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Finally, I would like to thank our team behind the scenes, Jeroen, Sarah, Dan, and Gail, for all the hard work preparing this webinar. As I mentioned before, we have a date for this year's Gaming in Spain conference, which has been scheduled for November 12th at the Wanda Metropolitano in Madrid. After the summer, we will also publish the next issue of our print magazine that you can receive free if you subscribe to our newsletter. I'd like to leave it at this today. Thank you all for joining us in, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.